Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. As you can see, the Corvette is not on the lift. It does have the hood open and it is on the race ramp, so it's ready to be put back on the lift. But to give a little update, so as in the last video you saw me finish installing the flex fuel sensor, then you saw me doing the wiring job, going from the sensor itself over to the PCM, down into the fender well, cleaning up the paint and all that, you know, from the leaking battery, and then finish it all off with wire loom, electrical tape, and all that good stuff. Well, I fired it up in that video, but I didn't actually take it for a test drive. So I wasn't sure if I'd have any issues driving the car with the PCM, with that sensor being functional and, you know, getting signal, sending signal to the PCM. There's no check engine lights, it's running. I also wanted to check the fuel lines just because, you know, once you start messing around with fuel lines, you just want to make sure everything's good. But I didn't have any issues with it running. You saw it idle in the garage, but I was concerned about like a longer road trip. So I drove around the neighborhood, went and got a little bit more gas, you know, drove it outside the neighborhood, and it ran just fine. It's like I don't think the car knows that the sensor's there. It's just that it is getting power, fuel is going through the sensor, but I had no issues with it on the first startup and test drive. So today we're going to be working on the fuel system side of this build, not just the sensor and the wiring for that, but the actual fuel pump, the signal for it, and some of the wiring for it. So what I've got in my hand is a Hobbs pressure switch. This is just a standard Hobbs pressure switch. I believe it's a 1/4 inch thread. It's from Honeywell, and this will actually thread into the side of the supercharger because there's a boss actually in the side of the blower that I'll take out a plug, thread this in, and then plug in. Well, I have to come up with a wire harness, but the wiring for the pressure switch. And this is your standard weather pack 2-pin setup. I'll have all the information in the description below, but this won't be a hack job. You know, this will actually have a professional weather pack, Delphi weather pack on the back of it, and then the wiring will go to the relay, and then that relay will eventually feed to the fuel pump. So that Hob switch is going to be the boost reference signal to send electrical charge to the relay, and once that's activated, the relay will send the power through the relay to the fuel pump. Speaking of the fuel pump, we've got a Deechworks external mount fuel pump. It's 350, I think that's gallons, something like that. I'm not sure. I'll have all the information in the description below, with all the proper information. And as you can see, it's going to be an external mounted pump. It is E85 compatible, and the part number is 150731. And as you can see, this is going to be an external mounted fuel pump that I'm going to mount on the frame rail. And you can see I've got the AN lines with the PTFE threaded fittings on the end. Now you might ask, why am I going with an external fuel pump? You guys, I have had serious issues with internal fuel pumps on this car, and there's a company called East Coast Superchargers that sells a external fuel pump setup for like $1,500. Well, I looked at that, I'm like, that's actually pretty cool, but that's a lot of money for an external fuel pump because there's not that much money in parts there. There's only probably $500 in parts, and they're charging you like an extra grand. So it's not an extra grand, but you know, there's a obvious markup there. So I've seen several guys do their own DIY external fuel pump setup, and it didn't cost them like $1,500. So what these guys use there's a few ways to do it. One way is to actually completely remove the factory fuel lines, but I thought that was kind of excessive. I mean, unless I was pushing out 1,000 horsepower and I needed like bigger diameter lines, yeah, I could understand that. But what I'm going to have is this. It is a external adapter that will plug in between the line coming out of the fuel tank, going into this adapter with a billet boss on the side of it, and that's -8 AN. And then this line going into the factory fuel line going up to the motor. So basically what this is, it allows you to add an external source for fuel to bypass the internal fuel system, the internal fuel pump and pickup. So what's going to happen is I'm going to have this billet block in the stock fuel line setup. I'll have the external line coming out of the side of the fuel tank, coming out of here, going into this 120-degree fitting, going through the fuel pump because flow goes out, and then this will be the billet line coming out of the fuel tank, coming out of the fuel pump, and that will go into this feed line going into the fuel system. So it's kind of hard to piece together, but that's basically how the fuel system is going to work. But before we can do all that, we need to get the fuel pump wiring set up. So today's install is going to be the Hob switch. I'm going to install that permanently, but what I'm going to do is I don't really want to start drilling, you know, and cutting and running all fuel lines and stuff like that. So today what I'm going to do is actually run the relay, the grounds, you know, temporarily, just kind of piece everything together. Then my fuel pump is going to be this LED light. So what I want to make sure is I want to make sure that that Hob switch works above 4 to 5 psi, and when it activates, I'll have the LED turn on, running it kind of above through the cowl and like mounted by the windshield wiper. So, you know, if I'm driving, I'll be able to see it glowing even during the day. See this port here on the side of the blower? That is where the Hob switch is going to feed through. So I'm not really sure the exact size on this port for the Edelbrock. I have a 3/16. You can see it's right here, 3/16. I've got a 3/16 Allen head in it, and when I put it in, it kind of felt like it stripped a little bit, like it twisted to the left, but finally it did eventually like tighten up. And I'll show you. I guess there's not too much damage in it, but it definitely felt like it went in and it wasn't tight. Oh, I guess it's tight now. Maybe I just didn't have it fully seated when I put it in. So yeah, no, that hardly moves at all. I would say that's the proper. So make sure you get a 3/16 Allen head key to remove the port plug on the side. So these are going to be the same diameter. And what we're going to do is screw this into the side of the blower. Okay guys, I actually double checked that red sealant. Pretty sure it was red Loctite. So I put just a dab of red Loctite on the threads, and we're just going to thread this into the side of the block. Just got to move everything out of the way. I didn't mean side of the block, side of the blower. Okay guys, as you can see, I have the Hob switch threaded all the way into the supercharger. It's threaded all the way to the end of the threads on the Hob switch itself. I pulled that plug, and this kind of moved everything else around with the fuel line, the brake booster, and the PCV. I've just fed the PCV under the switch, the brake line, the vacuum hose for the brake system, that's under the switch, and the fuel line is kind of just sitting on top of it, which sucks because it's kind of like literally all four, and the coolant line's kind of on top of that, so they're all literally fighting for the same spot. So we have the switch installed. Now we're going to start the wiring. Now this wiring isn't going to be too complex. This is actually the wiring diagram for the East Coast Supercharger external fuel pump system. So the quick overview is going to be, you've got the alternator positive terminal hookup. I've already taken the cover off. That runs to a 30 amp fuse. I've got 30 amp fuse. This goes into the relay. The relay has the positive side of the relay. The relay is going to have a signal. The signal is going to come from one of the posts on the Hob switch. And then when it sees an activation signal, the relay will click and send power down to the fuel pump. And the fuel pump will have a positive and negative. So the fuel pump in this diagram right here is where I'm going to have the LED. So I have to create a ground terminal for the fuel pump and the Hob switch. So basically what I think I'm going to do is find a chassis ground down here somewhere, a common ground. Yeah, there's one right there. So I'll probably just run the wiring. This is, like I said, this is gonna be mock-up. This isn't gonna be final. Run 2 wires to the ground right here by the radiator cover, radiator overflow tank, and the positive will go to the alternator. And vacuum source, well, that shows a vacuum line, but obviously the vacuum source will be the supercharger itself. Okay guys, I've got a good chunk of the mock-up wiring done, but I actually do need to wire in a finalized part of the wiring system for the car. So what I have is a weather pack style connector that's going to plug into the Hob switch, and it's going to look a lot better than just like some terminals with a wire hook on the end of it, like one of these on 2 sides of the Hob switch. I decided to pay a little bit more money for the weather pack style. That way it looks more OEM, and you can slide in, you know, so you know, your basic connector will look something like that, and it'll look pretty like it came from GM. So this is a Delphi PA66. It's just a 2-wire connector. The Hob switch I actually bought came with the female and already part of the switch, you know, molded into the switch. So what they sent you was the plastic part, the male part, the wire seal, and these terminals. These terminals basically will slide in and go into this male switch. They actually sent me 3, so you get 3 seals, 3 terminals, and you get, so basically 1 extra in case you screw up. So how you start is you put the seal, you feed the line through the seal over the line for your positive and negative, and then you strip the wire. So we need probably 1/2 inch. That should do it. So use your strippers, cut it, put your seal up to the edge of the wire, move it up. So what you want to do is put this round edge around it. What you're going to need is one of these weather pack crimping tools. I'll have a link in the description below to getting one of these. These aren't that expensive. I mean, I think they're under $20, and I've used it a lot on the Corvette. Didn't actually use it on the SS, but I have used it on the truck. So it's gotten a lot of use, and basically it's a 2-stage crimping tool. What I mean by 2 stages, it will have the middle, it'll lock the middle of the wire. And so this is actually a larger gauge wire and a larger gauge terminal. So I'm going to use the 3rd. See, you see these dual like rings in it. There's 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to use the larger of the ring of the twin post. And how you do this is you put the round part in the bottom of the tool. So you've got a round cavity here, and the top is a double hump. You put the round on the bottom. So 1, 2, 3. So make sure your terminal is on the seal. It is. Make sure your wire is in the housing. It is. And then we're just gonna crimp it. Okay. So the power wire is fed through the middle. Oh wow, guys! Hey, that actually got all 3. I actually had I have already crimped this first one as a test because it's been a while since I've done one of these. But pushing it more toward the front of this terminal, it actually crimped all 3. So that's pretty cool. So the wire's crimped. Now the second stage is going to be crimping the seal to your power source wire, and because this happens to be red, so your hot wire in this case. Again, you're going to have 3 terminals, 1, 3, and oh, there's actually, well, okay. For the actual circular part of sealing that seal, there's only 2. Use the bigger one in this case. So there's 1 and 5. Use the 5. Again, we're going to put the round part on the bottom of the little, I guess, press, if you want to call it that. Put the round part in the bottom. That way, the upper flange can get rounded and pressed against that seal. So round parts on the bottom. I've already started squeezing, so that's why it's already taking shape. Double checking the seal, we're good. And crimp it. Alright guys, so you can see I've got the seal crimped to the terminal, and I have all three of these internal little crimps tight against the wire. So the hot wire is done, and I happen to run it to this plug. Actually has two terminals. It says A and B, so I'm going to run hot to A and ground to B. You're basically going to stick this in there. There's a locking tab. This has to go the other way. There's a lock that keeps all this stuff in place, and I believe it, I guess it could go either way. Yeah, you could go either way with that. So, all right, and then there's the green seal. Put that back on. Slide it down. There you go. We now have a weather pack connector for the Hob switch. So here's the Hob switch. You can plug that in like OEM. All right, there you go. And you got your power, the red, the black will be the ground. The Bosch style relay has 5 pins in it. Okay, your power comes in, your power comes out the bottom. It goes like north, south, east, west. It doesn't go like north and then east. It goes north, south, east, west. So your 30 amp fuse comes in, fused wire comes in from the alternator, and the wire that's eventually going to go feeding the power to the fuel pump, or the light bulb in this case, is going to be number 87 coming out the bottom. So here's 86 on the side. That's going to be your power coming in, your 12 volt switch. Your 85 is going to be your ground wire that's going to go to the Hob switch. It's going to go to one side of the Hob switch, then the other side is going to go to the chassis ground. So how I have this wired is this white wire connected to the alternator is not a selected 12 volt switch. It's constant hot right now. I need to change this. This was just for mock-up. This is going to go probably to the fuse box, and I'm probably going to add a Tappa fuse to one of the fuses that is hot once you crank the car. So that's probably how it's going to work. But the 30 amp fuse, that actually could stay there because that's going to be fine. So, and when that Hob switch sees 5 psi or more, it will shut and allow the electricity. The switch will activate in the relay, allow the electricity go from the 30 to 87 and power the fuel pump. So how I have this wired up now is I've got 87 going to the light bulb, and I'll include a picture here of the light bulb activating at night, and then that's showing that the fuel pump would work. You know, this is a test light, of course, and with that glowing, I know it's working. I have a little video of it I'll include here. And that's pretty much it. Oh, 87A will not be used. The wire is still in the harness. I need to either depin it or clip it. Okay guys, that's going to wrap up the wire harness and the Hob switch install. Yeah, at least the wire harness prototype. I'm not sure if I'm going to film the actual wire harness that I end up making. I'll probably just go over it, because this was testing the system out, and I just wanted to make sure that this system was going to work before I start, like, you know, soldering, heat shrink tubing, and making it all professional, you know, and legit. So I just, like I said, I just wanted to prototype and make sure everything works before I get started on this part, and then I start tearing into the back of the fuel tank and all that stuff. So, and to help you guys for reference, I'll throw a couple links down in the description below to a thread I started on the Corvette forum. That way it has all of the wire terminals and outputs of what I covered. Because, you know, holding that little relay, it doesn't really show what, you know, what goes where. And I'll include that information below. But I hope this guys helps you out setting up a external fuel pump and a Hob switch and the relay system for all that. I hope it helps you guys out. I hope you guys enjoy the video. If you liked it, give it a big thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Thanks and have a great day.